Hello students, teachers, parents, history nerds. Hello everybody, and welcome to Nutshelled History, where we lay out the facts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today we are going to continue our American government series by looking at protecting our civil liberties. Don't forget that there's a link for a fill-in-the-blank worksheet in the description. I just ask that you like and subscribe. I apologize for any mispronunciations ahead of time. I do my best. Okay, let's go. The Declaration of Independence basically gives a shout-out to some unalienable rights, those personal freedoms we're born with, like the world's most epic baby shower gift. Fast forward to the Constitution's Bill of Rights, a top 10 list of these freedoms, like a playlist of liberty hits. Now, the Constitution throws around terms like civil liberties and civil rights as if they're interchangeable. Spoiler alert, they're not. Civil liberties are basically saying, hey, government, stay out of my business, while civil rights are like, yo, government, step in and make sure everyone's playing fair. Each civil liberty is a leash on government power, but don't get too excited. Total freedom isn't on the menu. You can use your rights, just not to crash someone else's party. Most of these constitutional perks apply to everyone in the U.S., even aliens, not the space kind, the foreign-born kind. The Bill of Rights originally just had the national government on lockdown. But thanks to the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause, the states had to hop on the bandwagon too. The Supreme Court got busy with a little thing called incorporation, which is just a fancy way of saying they started applying those rights everywhere. Oh, and in case you're wondering if the Constitution covers all your rights, the 9th Amendment winks and says, there's more where that came from. Turns out, we have more rights than we can count. So, let's focus in on some of the big ones. Free expression is like the air a free society breathes, and that includes freedom of religion and freedom of the press. The First Amendment is the ultimate hype man for religious freedom, backed up by its Establishment Clause and Free Exercise Clause. And the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause is like the bouncer that makes sure states don't mess with your religious groove. The Establishment Clause is pretty much Congress saying, we're staying out of the religion game. Thomas Jefferson even called it a wall of separation between church and state, though people are still arguing over how tall or wide that wall is, especially when it comes to education. In 1925, for example, the Supreme Court said, nah, you can't force parents to send their kids to public school instead of church schools. Cue dramatic gavel drop. Later on, in 1971, the Supreme Court came up with the lemon test. No, not a cooking show challenge, but a 3-part checklist to see if a state law is violating the Establishment Clause. The rules? 1. The law has to have a secular purpose, no religious strings attached. 2. It can't help or hurt religion. And 3. It shouldn't get the government tangled up in religion like a pair of earbuds in your pocket. Most of the time, the court has been like, nope. Public funds for church schools? Unconstitutional. But wait, there's more. The court also ruled that public schools can't host religious events. However, it's totally cool for students to pray if they want to. No need to schedule it between recess and math class. The Free Exercise Clause is the First Amendment's way of saying, believe whatever you want, we've got your back. But here's the catch. You can't use religion as a hall pass to break the law or hurt people. So, go ahead and practice your beliefs. Just keep it legal. The First and 14th Amendments don't stop there. They are like your personal hype squad for free speech and free press, making sure you can speak your mind and hear what others have to say. But there's a catch. You can't go full tabloid and start lying about people. That's where libel, printed lies, and slander, spoken lies, come in. Think of them as gossip's evil cousins. And yes, they can get you in trouble. Then there's sedition, which is basically when someone thinks they're the star of a rebellion movie and tries to overthrow the government with force. Newsflash, that's illegal. And seditious speech, encouraging others to join your would-be revolution, isn't covered by the First Amendment. The Supreme Court is pretty firm on this, and they're not big fans of obscenity either, just in case you were wondering. Now, symbolic speech, like holding signs or making a statement through actions, is a different story. The Supreme Court's cool with this, as long as it's peaceful. Picketing is the classic example. Workers patrolling with signs outside a business. As long as they're peaceful, no problem. But if they're picketing for something shady, even the most zen sign holding won't save them. The government, on the other hand, isn't allowed to put a gag on speech before it happens, a practice known as prior restraint, except in very rare cases. One of the most famous examples, the Pentagon Papers. Nixon's crew tried to block their publication, claiming it would jeopardize national security. The Supreme Court called their bluff and said, nah, that's not a good enough reason. And let's not forget about the media. While reporters don't have a constitutional right to keep their sources on the down low, many states have passed shield laws to protect them from being forced to spill the beans in court. Oh, and radio and TV. They get more rules than newspapers because they're using the public airwaves. It's like the government saying, if you're using our Wi-Fi, we get to set some boundaries. The First and 14th Amendments are also basically your VIP pass to gather with your friends and share your hottest takes on public issues. Want to influence public policy or give politicians a piece of your mind? Go for it. You can even write letters, take out ads, or stage a demonstration. But heads up, keep it peaceful. Blocking streets or shutting down schools, not part of the deal. You also can't go around endangering lives, property, or public order. And while civil disobedience, breaking the law on purpose to protest something, has its place in history, it's not exactly covered by the Constitution. So don't expect a free pass. The government does have the right to set some ground rules for when, where, and how you can assemble. But don't worry, they can't tell you what you can or can't say. That would be content bias, and that's a no-go. Most protests happen on public property because, well, it's hard to get attention in someone's backyard. But here's the catch. You don't have a constitutional right to protest on private property. So if you were planning to hand out flyers or collect signatures at the mall, you might want to rethink that strategy. Oh, and freedom of assembly also comes with a right to association. So if you and your buddies want to team up for a political, economic, or social cause, the Constitution's got your back. It's like the ultimate party planner for changemakers. Stop hogging the spotlight. Amendment 1. There are others that are Sigma as well. The Fifth Amendment basically tells the government, hey, you can't just take someone's life, liberty, or stuff without following the rules. And then the 14th Amendment says, oh, and that goes for you too, states. Due process is all about the government playing fair and using the proper procedures. But here's the kicker. If the laws themselves are unfair, even the fanciest procedures won't save you. Procedural due process is all about how the government does things, while substantive due process is about what the government is actually doing. Now, states have something called police power, which sounds intense but just means they can step in to protect public health, safety, morals, and general well-being. But they can't use that power to stomp all over due process. If the state's need to keep things in order clashes with your rights, the courts step in to figure out the balance. One famous case involved a police officer ordering a blood test from a suspected drunk driver without a warrant. The Supreme Court sided with the officer because keeping the roads safe sometimes trumps the need for a warrant. Safety first, am I right? And then there's eminent domain, where the government has the power to take your property for public use. But don't worry, they can't just take your land and leave you with an IOU. The government has to cough up fair market value for your property. It's like a forced sale, but at least you get paid for it. The 13th Amendment, added in 1865, came in like a wrecking ball to end slavery and forced labor. It doesn't just keep the government in check, it also applies to individuals. The Supreme Court even gave Congress the green light to go after racial discrimination with it, because, let's face it, bias is so last century. Then there's the Second Amendment, which is all about militias. Sorry, action movie fans, but it doesn't guarantee an individual's right to own a bazooka. The Supreme Court has never applied this right through the 14th Amendment, so states get to call the shots on who can pack heat and how. Now, the Third and Fourth Amendments are your personal space defenders. The third one's like, no soldiers, you can't crash at my place, a throwback to those unwanted British sleepovers in colonial times. The Fourth Amendment is more about keeping nosy cops from rifling through your stuff. If they want to search your house, they need a proper warrant backed by probable cause. Back in the day, the British had these writs of assistance. Basically, a permission slip to search whatever they felt like. The Fourth Amendment shuts that down. Speaking of searches, we've got the exclusionary rule. If the cops find something during an illegal search, it's like, sorry, not usable. There are exceptions though. If something's in plain sight, or if you're out in public and up to no good, the police don't need a warrant. And if you're cruising in your car, boat, or private jet with illegal stuff, don't count on the vehicle saving you. If there's probable cause, the police can search it without waiting for paperwork. Post 9/11, things got a bit tighter with the USA Patriot Act, which gave the government more power to keep an eye on both domestic and international threats. It's all about surveillance, investigations, immigration, and choking off terrorist funding. Of course, some civil liberties debates popped up, and the courts will keep sorting those out. Oh, and if you're making international calls or sending emails with shady contacts, don't be shocked if the National Security Agency is eavesdropping. Finally, we've got the hot-button issue of privacy. The Supreme Court's faced some of its most controversial battles over how far states can go in limiting a woman's right to an abortion. And that's one privacy debate that's far from over. Now, just because you are accused of a crime does not mean you lose your constitutional protections. The Constitution is basically a criminal defense lawyer's dream team, offering up all kinds of guarantees for those accused of crimes. First off, there's the writ of habeas corpus, which is basically a fancy way of saying, hey jailer, explain why you're holding this person. If they can't give a good reason, the prisoner walks. Then there's the ban on bills of attainder. No skipping the trial and heading straight to punishment. Thank you very much. Also, Congress and the states aren't allowed to pull any retroactive rule change shenanigans with ex post facto laws where they make something illegal and then try to punish you for doing it before it was a crime. Nope, not happening. Next up, the grand jury. They decide if there's enough evidence to charge someone with a serious crime. If the prosecutor shows up with an indictment, a formal complaint, the grand jury either says, yeah, let's go to trial, or nah, not enough here, drop the charges. Occasionally, the grand jury gets bold and brings charges all on its own. This rare move is called a presentment, but it's like spotting a unicorn in federal courts. Most of the time, prosecutors just go the information route, where they swear they've got enough evidence for trial. Double jeopardy? That's a no-go. If you're tried once and found not guilty, the state can't pull a double dip and try you again for the same crime. And when you do go to trial, you get the whole shebang. A speedy, public trial with a jury and a lawyer by your side. If you'd rather skip the jury and let the judge decide, that's called a bench trial. It's like the legal version of saying, I'll take my chances with just one opinion. Then there's the Fifth Amendment, your right to remain silent, hero, protecting you from self-incrimination. The famous Miranda rule? Yeah, that's when the police have to read you your rights when you're arrested, because they can't just assume you know all that legal mumbo-jumbo. The Eighth Amendment comes in to make sure things don't get too wild when it comes to bail and punishment. No ridiculous bail amounts, okay? Bail is like a security deposit. You pay to stay out of jail until your trial. Don't show up, say goodbye to that money. And while we're at it, cruel and unusual punishment is off the table too. No medieval torture methods like burning at the stake. The Supreme Court says the death penalty's okay as long as it's applied fairly, which is why states use a two-step process. First, decide if you're guilty, and then figure out if you deserve the death penalty. Seems only fair to break it up like that. Treason is the only crime the Constitution itself defines. Why? Because the Founding Fathers were sick of tyrants using it as a catch-all to take down political enemies. So treason's limited to two things, making war against the US or helping its enemies. That's it. No vague charges here. Good stuff. Thank you, Liberties. Now let's recap. The Declaration of Independence gave us a shout-out for our natural-born rights, and the Constitution's Bill of Rights turned those into the ultimate playlist of personal freedoms. Civil liberties are the government's cue to stay out of your business. while civil rights demand it steps in to ensure fairness. The Constitution's Ninth Amendment reminds us there's even more to our rights than we can count. Big freedoms like expression, religion, and press come courtesy of the First and 14th Amendments. But don't misuse them. Libel, slander, and sedition aren't covered. Symbolic speech is cool, but keep it peaceful, and prior restraint, that's mostly off the table. Government can set the ground rules for protests, but blocking streets, not part of the deal. Procedural and substantive due process make sure states and the feds play fair, while the 5th and 14th Amendments have your back with due process. And even eminent domain makes sure you get paid for your property. Amendments 3 and 4 protect your personal space, but the Patriot Act and privacy issues show the courts are still figuring out some modern-day challenges. Plus, if you're accused of a crime, the Constitution ensures due process, protection from double jeopardy, and no cruel or unusual punishment. Oh, and treason? It's very specific, waging war or helping enemies. There you have it, folks. That is protecting civil liberties, nutshell. Thanks for stopping by Nutshelled History. I grant you liberty to hit up those like and subscribe buttons for me. What do you think is the most important liberty that we discussed today? Let us know in the comments down below. See y'all next time on Nutshelled History.